The United Kingdom, Great Britain, is rearming. After years of balancing soft power through international aid and hard power through military presence, the UK is remilitarising completely. Indeed, such significant is this move, the Labour Party, Labour government, is U-turning on some of its manifesto commitments in a time where things are rapidly changing in the international order, the United States, NATO, Russia, Ukraine, and more. So join me in this video as I break down exactly what this policy shift means, why it's so significant, and how it will play out not only for the UK, but Europe, Ukraine, and the overall Western set of alliances.
This is the Global Gambit.
How are you going? Name's Pyotr, Global Gambit. We appreciate the conversation and consider subscribing as we get into this conversation, which is the pretty remarkable policy shift of Britain making the decision to reshape, well, perhaps its global standing position for many years to come. With the war in Ukraine grinding on and the US pulling back from European security seemingly inevitable, the UK has committed to a massive boost in defence spending. But is this simply a bold step towards security or a desperate reaction to the changing world order? Some people see it as the UK government, Keir Starmer's government, trying to be proactive, versus others who think it's already too late. And the UK is not the empire it once was, and frankly, therefore, it doesn't make a difference. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, as I'm very curious for this wide-ranging set of thoughts. Now, the Labour Party has thrown, largely speaking, its manifesto out of the window. It was committed to increasing aid under that manifesto, but has U-turned largely completely, axing it to redirect the funds and financial focuses towards increasing defence spending and encouraging more of Europe to step up. Indeed, Sir Keir Starmer has made it clear in the past couple of weeks his desire to commit UK troops to any potential DMZ, you could argue, on the border with Ukraine, unlike, say, the French or even the Polish. Now, just last year, Labour promised to restore the UK's foreign aid budget to about 0.7% of national income. Now, though, they're slashing it to fund that military expansion. And I think the numbers here are key. So let's get through them specifically. Right now, the UK will commit to about 2.5% of GDP by 2027, and aiming for 3% even before the end of the decade. The aid budget for 0.5 to 0.3% now, instead of the committed 0.7%, which is usually what most members of the United Nations agree. That, in some people's estimations, would save about £13.4 billion a year. The UK military shortfall, though, is about a 17 billion equipment deficit. There's also a manpower shortage, and the UK has been struggling for many years to encourage sign-ups amongst younger men, but also women, given the UK military is open to both joining. Now, though, with the Trump pressure, he has been pushing for NATO allies to hit 5% of GDP. Of any country closest to that, it's currently Poland, which is at about 4.45%, but still not all the way there. And even the United States in recent years has actually reduced its military contribute, although it still surpasses 3%. NATO's new goal for NATO allies, at least in Europe, is about 3%. And that would push somewhat, people argue, enough, at least as a baseline, to be able to counteract future threats, notably from Vladimir Putin. But exactly why? Well, there's a simple reason for that. It's the Trump effect. Trump has made it clear Europe can no longer rely on America's security umbrella. And as you've seen across this channel and many other of my esteemed colleagues, the Europeans are, it seems to be, finally reacting, from the Paris coalition held to Macron visiting DC earlier this week and making it clear to Trump that the Europeans are going to be stepping up and that it's within the interest of the United States to remain active and engaged with Europe, not just in the context of Ukraine, but overall. Trump's pressuring of allies to boost defense spending and more has hinted that he might even pull the US support for NATO altogether. Politico article from a few months ago indeed raised the point of, could there be a full withdrawal or simply a significant defunding of the alliance? That sent European capitals into panic mode, France, Germany, and now the UK scrambling to harden their defences before it's too late, and the recent German election and inevitable Chancellor Merz making it very clear that he intends to do a significant pivot away from the much more fence-sitting Olaf Scholz. So you will see two significant major powers, the UK and Germany, really upscaling their militarization. Whether or not that's enough in the short to medium term, it makes a difference during the peace negotiations that continue between Russia and the United States without Ukraine, though remains to be seen. But here's the twist: that massive increase might still be not enough. A former defence chief of staff has said that his decision to hike UK defence spending, that being Sir Keir Starmer, has been accelerated. Indeed, General Sir David Richards said the decision to raise defence spending over the next 2 years was a strategic move, a sound one, but one that, quote, almost certainly would not have happened without Trump. But there's the irony. The Europeans have known for a long time the likelihood of Trump becoming president once again, and they have still rested on their laurels not to move faster, to, well, be proactive instead of reacting. The Lord Richards has stressed that the British Army was, quote, very hollowed out indeed, and suggested that the army just simply isn't big enough currently for British troops to be part of a rotation of European, quote unquote, peacekeeping forces. Indeed, that in of itself illustrates that there is quite a lot of disagreement or ambiguity about what exactly a European security architecture would look like. In the context of Ukraine, would that be in a peacekeeping sense? Would it more of be a deterrence? Would that have enough of a deterrence were the United States not be part of that coalition? We see those existing in the eastern parts of the Baltics, for example, and task forces, one of which is led by the UK. But the UK has a very small element down there, and would it have enough military prowess in a more actual substantive sense, not simply just leading a task force, to actually cover the whole of the border with the occupied areas of Ukraine? For example, for years, the British military has been shrinking. Decades of budget cuts have left the armed forces overstretched, underfunded, and facing that 17 billion equipment shortfall. Even with any new funding, most of the money will be plugging gaps, fixing critical shortages rather than necessarily expanding capabilities. Meanwhile, Trump is demanding that 5%, only puts more pressure. And Trump, not being exactly arguably one of the most patient people in the world, might make it harder for effective coordination between European capitals to occur. Something I made very clear in one of my other videos is the biggest fallout to European defense and security is its coordination. If done well and proactively done well, the Europeans have the capacity. It's the coordination that's the problem. So what happens next? Well, Starmer is now in the middle of these delicate negotiations, all in the run-up before he visits Trump at the end of this week and tries to maintain, much like Macron has done, in ensuring that the United States has a role of some form in Europe. British and the French may well be nuclear-wielding states, but they do not have kinetic size capabilities to replace that of the United States. At the same time, Sir Keir is hosting European leaders to hammer out a broader defense strategy in case America does pull back. We're seeing multiple capitals hosting their own rounds of conversations with foreign ministers, defense ministers, even finance ministers to talk about the real logistical challenges and upfront costs of reshaping European security architecture, with or without necessarily NATO even. And let's not forget who benefits from the spending. Will Britain reinvest in its own defense industry, for example, or will it become even more dependent on US arms manufacturers? Indeed, this is one of the key points. A lot of Britons may be actually on side of redirecting money from aid towards military expenditure, given the new, reality that we seem to be in, the new international order that is emerging, and that middle powers, upper middle powers like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, etc., are having to go it alone without the security assurances of once considered ally great powers, namely the United States. Great power competition is here, and as I said in another video as well, arguably they are sitting down at the global table to carve up different sections based on their own independent and self-interests, that being Russia, China, the United States, maybe even India. And so this brings me to another critical point, the overall deficit. One article, which I plan to do a deeper video on, has provided a thorough analysis of what it would require to actively build a defense without the United States. What is needed? They provide an initial estimate that additional weapons and troops Europe will need, we're talking 300,000 troops. 300,000 troops across Europe to replace what would be the fighting capacity of US troops dotted around Europe, be that in NATO or not. As it stands, Russia's military production has ramped up. Russia is in a wartime setting, and they have refurbished an estimated 1,500 tanks, 5,700 armoured vehicles, and 450 artillery pieces of all types. So if the US were to withdraw, the EU would have to spend only another 0.2% of its GDP. But that's not the same as national contributions and ensuring that national governments were able to bring their own military, independent militaries, up to scratch. It adds the complication between the European Union, NATO, and individual sovereign states. European defence spending would have to increase substantially from the current level of about 2% of GDP. An initial assessment suggesting an increase of about 250 billion annually, or about 3.5% of GDP, is what would be warranted in the short term. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of ifs and considerations here. But the point is that the UK, for the first time, is significantly rising and upscaling its military considerations and focuses. Is this the right decision? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. One thing is clear though, the world order is shifting, and it's whether or not we as a country, we as a continent, being European, I still aspire to be part of Europe in some way, can keep up, whether we can be proactive, get ahead of America retreating, be not simply a country or continent stuck in the middle of great power competition, but ultimately define our own future identity, prosperity, and such. Will it actually make Britain safer, or just deepen its dependency on unreliable allies, for example? Is the special relationship even a thing anymore? These kinds of questions are all that's going through my mind, and I wonder if they're going through yours too. So, if you enjoyed the video, let me know. Give it a like, subscribe. I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. And as always, as we say on the Global Gambit, you've either got to get playing, Britain, are we going to, or be played? Europe, let's not do it. Take care, everyone.